Achilles didn't die a hero. He bled out in the dirt like a wounded animal. A coward's arrow, guided by a god's arrogant smirk, reduced a legend to a handful of ash. While his mother's scream rocks Olympus, the gods only laugh at his agony. Witness how greatness truly shatters, leaving behind nothing but smoke and eternal oblivion.
Forget marble statues. The ancient world was a grim spectacle, run by divine hunters who demanded human sacrifice and destroyed lives on a whim. We're peeling back the layers of their madness. This is Shroud of Lore.
From bloody vengeance to a god's betrayal, the greatest hero fell to dust from a coward's arrow, leaving behind mountains of the dead and a mother's cry that shook Olympus itself. But that final moment had not yet come. First, there was the choice. Achilles stood over Hector's funeral pyre, watching the flames consume the enemy he had dragged through the dust for 12 days. The war should have ended there. Troy's champion was ash. The city's walls stood naked without their defender. Instead, fresh armies kept arriving. First came the Amazons, warrior women from the edge of the world, led by their queen Penthesilea. Then the Ethiopians, dark-skinned giants under King Memnon, son of the Dawn herself. Troy's allies poured in from every corner of the earth, each wave replacing the dead, each army convinced they would be the ones to finally stop Achilles. He welcomed them all. Something had broken inside him after Patroclus died. Something that used to care about honor, about limits, about the difference between a warrior and a butcher. Now there was only the killing, and the brief moments of emptiness between kills when he remembered why he was fighting. "You should rest," Odysseus told him one evening. "The men are starting to fear you more than they fear the Trojans." Good. Achilles did not look up from sharpening his spear. Fear keeps them alive. It's not that kind of fear. They see what you've become. We all do. And what have I become? Odysseus was silent for a long moment. Something that doesn't stop. Something that doesn't feel. "Achilles, when Penthesilea arrives tomorrow, I'll kill her like I killed the rest. She's a queen. Daughter of Ares. There are laws about laws." Achilles finally looked up, and Odysseus took an involuntary step back. "Hector asked me about laws. About pacts between warriors. I told him there are no pacts between lions and men." He smiled, and there was nothing human in it. "I was wrong. There are no pacts at all. There's only the strong and the dead." The next morning, Penthesilea rode onto the battlefield at the head of her Amazon guard. She was magnificent, golden armor, flowing hair, a spear that had drunk the blood of 100 heroes. The Trojans cheered as she charged the Greek lines. Achilles met her alone. Their duel lasted less than a minute. For all her skill, for all her divine heritage, Penthesilea was mortal. Achilles was something else, something that had stopped being entirely human the day Patroclus died. His spear took her through the chest. As she fell, her helmet came loose, and for the first time Achilles saw her face. She was beautiful. Young, younger than he had expected. And in her dying eyes, he saw not hatred but something worse, recognition. She had known she would die here. She had come anyway, hoping to find glory in the attempt. Just like him. Just like everyone who came to this cursed beach. For one moment, something stirred in the hollow place where his heart had been. Something that might have been grief, or regret, or simple human connection. Then Thersites laughed. The ugliest man in the Greek army, famous for his cruelty and his cowardice, stood over Penthesilea's body and mocked her death. He mocked her beauty, her courage, her foolish hope of defeating the great Achilles. Achilles hit him once. Thersites dropped and did not move again. The Greek camp fell silent. Anyone else? Achilles looked around at the horrified faces of his own army. Anyone else want to laugh? No one spoke. No one dared. Achilles walked back to his tent, leaving two bodies behind him, one an enemy he almost respected, one an ally he had killed without thought. The line between the two was getting harder to see. Memnon arrived 3 days later. The Ethiopian king was unlike any enemy Achilles had faced. Taller than Ajax, stronger than Hector, blessed by his mother Eos with armor forged in the halls of the gods themselves. His army swept through the Greek lines like fire through dry grass. And he had a personal reason to fight. "I've heard of you," Memnon called across the space between their armies. "The man who kills without mercy. The monster who dragged Hector through the dust. My aunt Eos weeps each dawn for the souls you've sent to darkness. Then she'll have more to weep for tomorrow." They did not fight that day, or the next. Memnon was too clever for a direct assault. He probed the Greek defenses, tested their weaknesses, picked off champions in small skirmishes. Each day, more Greeks fell. Each day, Memnon's confidence grew. On the 5th day, he killed Antilochus. Achilles heard the news from Nestor himself, the old king stumbling into his tent, face gray with grief, voice breaking as he described how his youngest son had died. "He was protecting me," Nestor whispered. "Memnon's spear was meant for my heart. Antilochus threw himself in the way. He saved my life and lost his own." Antilochus. Young, brave, laughing Antilochus, who had brought Achilles the news of Patroclus's death, who had held him while he wept, who had been one of the few people left in the world that Achilles might have called a friend. Gone now. Like Patroclus. Like everyone he cared about. The hollow place inside him cracked wider, and something dark poured out. "Where is Memnon?" "Achilles, wait," the funeral rites, but Achilles was already gone, strapping on his armor as he ran, his only thought the face of the man who had taken yet another piece of his soul. He found Memnon at the center of the Ethiopian lines, surrounded by his guard. The king saw him coming and smiled. "Finally. I was beginning to think you were afraid." Achilles did not answer with words. He answered with his spear. The duel was savage. Memnon was the strongest opponent Achilles had ever faced, every blow shook his bones, every parry tested the limits of his divine-blessed strength. For the first time since Patroclus died, Achilles felt something other than emptiness. He felt alive. The battle raged as the sun crossed the sky. Both men bled from a dozen wounds. Both refused to fall. On Olympus, the gods themselves gathered to watch, placing wagers on the outcome. In the end, it came down to a single moment of hesitation. Memnon's mother Eos, unable to bear watching her son die, sent a flash of light across the battlefield, a desperate attempt to blind Achilles, to give her child one final chance. It was not enough. Achilles drove his spear through Memnon's throat, and the greatest of Troy's allies fell. Eos's scream of grief echoed across the world. The dawn herself descended to gather her son's body, her tears falling as morning dew across the blood-soaked plain. Achilles watched her go, feeling nothing. "Two down," he said to no one. "How many more?" As if in answer, he felt a chill run down his spine. Someone was watching him, not the usual divine presence he had grown accustomed to, but something colder. More personal. He looked toward Troy and saw a figure standing on the walls. Golden hair. Silver bow. The cruel smile of a god who had finally lost patience with a mortal's arrogance. Apollo. Achilles raised his spear in salute. "Come down and fight me yourself, if you dare." The god's smile widened. And Achilles, drunk on victory, did not understand that he had just signed his own death warrant. The days that followed were a blur of conquest. With Hector dead, Penthesilea fallen, and Memnon slain, Troy had no champions left to face Achilles. He drove the Trojans back to their walls and kept them there, slaughtering anyone foolish enough to venture out. The war was nearly won. Everyone could see it. "One more push," Agamemnon said at the war council. "Break through the Scaean gates, and the city falls." Achilles barely listened. His mind was on the figure he kept seeing on Troy's walls, Apollo, always watching, always smiling that cold smile. The god had not spoken to him since their exchange after Memnon's death, but his presence was constant, oppressive. Let him watch, Achilles thought. Let him see what a mortal can do. The assault on the Scaean gates began at dawn. Achilles led the charge, his armor blazing in the morning light, his war cry drowning out the screams of dying men. Trojan defenders fell before him like wheat before a scythe. He reached the gates themselves. One more barrier between him and victory. One more obstacle to destroy. Apollo, he shouted at the sky. Do you see this? Do you see your precious Troy falling? Come down and stop me, if you can. The arrow came from nowhere. One moment Achilles was raising his sword for the blow that would shatter the gates. The next, fire exploded through his heel, his one vulnerable spot, the place where his mother's hand had gripped him when she dipped him in the river Styx. He looked down and saw the shaft protruding from his ankle. A simple arrow, guided by a god's hand, fired by Paris, cowardly, worthless Paris, who had never won a fair fight in his life. The strength drained from Achilles' legs. He fell to his knees in the dust before the gates he had been about to breach. No. The word came out as a whisper. Not like this. Not by his hand. Paris stood on the wall above him, bow still raised, face pale with shock at what he had done. Behind him, Apollo's golden form shimmered in the morning light. Did you think I would let you destroy my city? The god's voice echoed in Achilles' fading mind. Did you think there would be no price for your arrogance? Achilles tried to rise. His legs would not obey. I am the son of Thetis, he gasped. I am the greatest warrior who ever lived. I cannot fall to him, all men fall, Apollo said. Even the sons of goddesses. Even the greatest warriors. You were always going to die here, Achilles. The only question was when. The world was growing dark. Achilles could hear shouting, Greek voices, calling his name, trying to reach him. He could hear Trojan cheers, wild with disbelief at their salvation. And beneath it all, he could hear something else. A sound that cut through the noise of battle, through the fading of his consciousness, through the very fabric of reality itself. His mother's cry. Thetis knew. Somehow, across all the distance between the mortal world and the depths of the sea, she knew her son was dying. Her grief rose from the waves like a living thing, a sound so terrible that even the gods on Olympus fell silent. Achilles closed his eyes. So this is what glory looks like, he thought. Dying in the dirt, killed by a coward, with my mother's tears as my only funeral song. The darkness took him. The Greeks fought for 17 days to recover his body. Ajax carried him from the field while Odysseus held off the Trojan advance. They lost 100 men in the retreat, then 100 more defending the corpse from enemies who wanted to defile it as Achilles had defiled Hector. In the end, they saved him. But saving the body could not save the man. The funeral pyre burned for 9 days. The Greeks cut their hair and wept and made sacrifices to gods who did not answer. They held games in his honor, racing, wrestling, competitions of skill, as if such things could capture any fragment of what Achilles had been. Thetis rose from the sea to collect her son's ashes. She moved through the Greek camp like a ghost, her divine beauty dimmed by grief beyond measure. No one dared speak to her. No one dared meet her eyes. She found the golden urn where Achilles' ashes had been mixed with those of Patroclus, together in death as they had been in life. She lifted it with hands that trembled, and her tears fell upon the cold metal. I warned you, she whispered. I told you what would happen if you came to Troy. I begged you to choose a long life over a short one. The urn did not answer. The ashes did not stir. You wanted glory. You wanted your name to live forever. And now look at you, a handful of dust in a golden cup, no different from the thousands you killed. She clutched the urn to her chest and wept, a goddess weeping for her mortal son, her cries carrying across the wine-dark sea to every corner of the world. On Olympus, the gods heard and were unmoved. They had seen countless heroes rise and fall. They would see countless more. Achilles was exceptional, yes, but in the end he was only human. In the end, they all were. Thetis carried the urn into the depths of the sea, to a place where no mortal would ever find it. There she would keep her son's remains for eternity, a reminder of the child she had loved and lost to the hunger of war. The Greeks buried an empty tomb on the shores of Troy. They raised a mound of earth and stone, planted a marker that would endure for centuries. Here lies Achilles, the inscription read. Greatest of the Greeks. But the words were a lie. Achilles did not lie there. Achilles did not lie anywhere. He had become what all heroes become in the end, a story. A name passed from mouth to mouth, growing larger with each telling, losing more of the man with each embellishment. The rage that had driven him, the grief that had broken him, the love that had made him human, all of it faded into legend. Only the glory remained. And the glory, as Achilles had finally understood in his last moments, was nothing but smoke. Smoke rising from a funeral pyre, dispersing into the uncaring sky, leaving nothing behind but ash and the echo of a mother's endless grief. The war continued without him. Troy would fall, eventually. The Greeks would go home to kingdoms that had forgotten them, to families that had learned to live without them. But the sound of Thetis weeping, that would never fade. It would echo through the ages, a reminder of the price of glory, the cost of war, the terrible truth that even the greatest heroes are, in the end, only mortal. Only dust. Only forgotten.